So right there in the Bible, there are two accounts of how Judas died. Judas, the betrayer, the one who took 30 pieces of silver for turning Jeshua into the Romans. We all know the story that afterwards he went back to the temple and he threw the 30 pieces of silver down on the ground and he ran off and hanged himself. And we all see it. It's been immortalized in Jesus Christ Superstar. And we all know this story. Did he commit suicide? Or was there some sort of God retribution for the acts that he had done? The interesting thing is, the only place we have these stories is in the Bible. And in the Bible, it contradicts itself. It actually says there are two different ways that Judas died. And so when we look at this concept first, Matthew 27:5 states, he took the money he had received for betraying Jesus, threw it down in the temple, and went and hanged himself. That's the story we find from Matthew. Now, as I've said in other videos, Matthew, Mark, and Luke are all considered to be coming from a single source. So the actual origins of those books is considered dubious to biblical scholars even. That is the story we've been told, that he throws the money down and then he goes and hangs himself. But then we jump over to Acts 1:18. It says that Judas used the money to purchase a field, and falling headlong, he burst asunder in the midst, and all his bowels gushed out. So in other words, he bought a field, and he had a bad fall, and when he fell, all his guts came out. Well, the only source we have to go back to for clarification is the Bible. But both of these come from the Bible. So the Bible is full of these kind of contradictions. So did Judas kill himself or not? We have no idea. We have no idea what the story of Judas is. And from my past life regression, I have no memory of what happened to Judas at all. So I can't even shed my own perspective on it because I don't know. And I will never say something I don't have a memory of. But when you look at this concept, there's so many people who will argue that the Bible is infallible. But I can bring example after example after example of these kind of contradictions all the way through the Bible. And they'll say the Bible hasn't been changed, it hasn't been altered, it hasn't been touched, and it's infallible, and the Word of God is the Bible. But you look at this, how can you trust something where it literally tells you two separate stories? How can you put faith in it? Now, once again, both of these situations is talking about this character who was portrayed as the villain in the story. Do I believe he was probably not a nice guy? That's been my gut feeling about it the whole time. In fact, I did a whole video on Judas, which you can find on the channel. Do I have any memory of him committing suicide or doing any of those things? I don't. But the idea of that story being infallible falls into question. And when things like that start to fall into question, you have to start to come to the place of saying, okay, does it matter? What in this past story is the key element? And then you start to have what I call the love goggles. You start to look at the Bible from the point of view of seeing where love comes out. Then we go over to the book of John, which is my favorite book in the Bible, which has its own problems, which absolutely has its own problems. But one of my favorite quote of the Bible comes right out of it. God is love. God is love. I say it all the time, right? And if God is love, right, would God have this horrible retribution on Judas and have his guts spill out all over a field from a simple fall? Who would, in any way, shape, or form, think that love would do that? Judas committed suicide. That's a possibility. It's a choice that Judas could have made, and potentially that could have happened. It also could simply be the storyteller saying Judas felt so bad about what he had done to the Messiah that he ran headlong out and hung himself because basically we have no idea what the actual story is. And the people who think the Bible is infallible, they will tell you that it's a matter of faith. Well, faith is an interesting thing because You have to believe it. But how can you believe something that is so contradictory? Two separate stories about the death of Judas. Now, is that story that he hanged himself? Is the story that he fell and his guts popped out all over the place? Does it really matter? Is it loving? No. It's just a story. It's a story of some sort of retribution to the guy who supposedly, was the impetus for the death of Joshua. For me, once again, I will say, it doesn't matter who anybody was back then. It doesn't matter who anybody is ever. It only matters who you are now. The most important thing about the Bible and all the things is the last commandment. Love one another. But you can only love one another in the present moment. It's about being here now. So holding on to these stories and arguing over all this stuff that happened 2,000 years ago, and the only evidence you have is this book, and this book itself is contradictory. It really comes down to, what does it matter? It only matters that right here, right now, you are being love. And if you are being love in the here and now, then that's all that Joshua ever asked you for. Love one another. I leave you the one commandment. Love one another. And that's the key to this. So did Judas commit suicide? I don't know. I don't care. I'm just being loving. You guys have a great day, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and I will talk to you soon. See ya. Bye.